Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Wealth Wednesday show. We are so excited to have you joining us tonight, and also we are super excited for tonight's topic as we are going to discuss on how your emotions affect your money habits, and also how you think about money, your attitude towards money, how all that creates your financial habit. And tonight we are so honored to have a guest all the way from United States of America. His name is Dr. Alex. He is a financial psychologist. Yes, you heard me right, financial psychologist. And he will be sharing with us on how our psychology tends to affect our money personalities. This is something most of us tend to overlook. We always go to the clinic to check on our health. We are going to we get mental health coaches to check on our mental health. We are doing everything, but we don't check on our financial health. So it's very important for us to discuss tonight on how our psychology, how our thinking affects our money habits. So I just want to highlight, if you've ever gone to a shop and for some reasons your credit card got declined, or a debit card got declined when you presented it to the cashier, most of us, we will throw up, will throw tantrums and say, I have money in that account, my card cannot be declined, check again. That clearly tells you, why did you get angry immediately you are told your card is being declined? It means that there is an emotion that is attached to money. There is either a direct or indirect relationship between your emotions and money. And tonight we're going to discuss deeper on that with Dr. Alex, who is the founder of Financial Psychology Center located in Los Angeles. So I don't want to give much introduction about him. I want him to tell us about himself so that we can begin the show. So Dr. Alex, welcome. Take over the show and introduce yourself to the audience.
Thank you so much, Sheila. My name is Dr. Alex Melkumian, and it's a pleasure to be on the show talking about money and emotion. So my background, as you mentioned, is in clinical psychology. I've been a clinical therapist here in Los Angeles, California, since the last recession of 2008 and 9. And I was just getting into the field of clinical psychology at the time. And what was interesting to me is how many of my clients were starting to talk about their emotions around money, how much they were stressed. Some of my clients were losing their home, were losing employment, or large portfolios of their 401ks. And what was the underlying roots of all those discussions? The stress, despair, anxiety that they were experiencing. And hence, it really piqued my interest as a clinician. And I started to wonder, why is it that the field of psychology and economics don't have something that merges the two, which is financial psychology is. So that really set me forth on the journey to study financial psychology. And I'm so happy to be here and talking to you about money.
Wow, thank you so much for that profound introduction. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about Financial Psychology Center and, you know, share with the audience much about it.
Yeah, so Financial Psychology Center was founded a few years ago. Again, really to help so many our clients to talk about the money taboo, right? And that's something that
Mm.
is so common in many different cultures, from American culture to Western culture, and really all over. It's kind of interesting from a clinical perspective that we're much more open about so many other things like our sex lives and our relationships and things like that. But however, when we start talking about money, people are just kind of shut down. And that's one of the really important reasons why financial psychology is as an industry, as a domain, is important to help address those things that we're not talking about and help clients to really express their beliefs, their emotions, and their experience in regards
Mm-hmm.
to finances. Because if we don't talk about it, it kind of gets repressed, shuts stuffs down, and it really affects our unconscious mind. And when it gets into our unconscious mind, that's when kind of weird things happen.
Mm. Yeah, that is very true, and I'm so excited tonight because you're going to learn how our psychology will affect our money, especially people don't want to talk about money. We are so excited to talk about everything else, but when it comes to money, it's kinda the most avoided conversation. And anytime you try to raise it up, there is this look that people gives you like, don't talk about it. So tonight we're so excited. To our audience, keep on joining us. Ensure you subscribe to our channel, share the link out with your friends, and prepare your questions, as we shall be having a session where Dr. Alex will be sharing with us, will be answering most of your questions. So for the interest of time, we shall dive into the first question. Dr. Alex, briefly explain what psychology of money means.
Hmm. Great question. So this is a question I get asked like all the time on a daily basis, and we kind of covered that a little bit earlier on. But I like to really think of it from a storyline perspective, and there's that cliche saying that there are two sides to every story. Well,
Mm-hmm.
when we tell our money story, when we look at money, that story has been written from a mathematical or a practical storyline, right? From a practical or money narrative.
Yeah,
And so the flip side of that coin, and no pun intended, is the psychological part, right?
yeah.
Obviously, the
Mm-hmm.
practical part is very, very important. And every financial planner, economist will tell you what the numbers are and what to do in a practical way. However,
Yeah.
there are many deep underlying roots and reasons why
Mm-hmm.
we behave with money the way we do that don't
Yeah.
necessarily have to do with the mathematical equation, not the practical part, but the emotional, the psychological, our beliefs and assumptions. And the psychological side really encompasses our mindset, our emotions, and also our cultural context, as well as relational. And relational means how we relate to our family members, how we relate to our friends. Does money become a status symbol amongst our friends, for instance, is a good example. How do we relate in our marriage through money? Do we express our
Mm-hmm.
love through money when we buy our partner something? And if we don't buy something for our partner, does that mean we don't love them? So things like that. And that's really what financial psychology is all about.
Wow. I never thought of say financial psychology in terms of the relational part. However, as you mentioned it, how we relate with our friends, with our family, uh, something just came up in my mind. I've in my field of work, I've met people, especially couples, who you find one partner has purchased some properties, but the person doesn't want the other partner to know about it. So I believe that uh, goes back to matters of to their psychology towards money, and they kind of have this not really fear, but they have this type of mindset towards money that leads them to maybe hold some financial information from their partners. And also, you mentioned something about cultural, how our cultures affect our money, or the cultural exposure someone has. It greatly affects how you view money and your attitude towards money, especially for those people who come from cultures where they believe in sharing everything. Such a person will have a totally different attitude as compared to someone who comes from a culture where my money is my money, my thing is my thing. I don't have to, share with anyone else. So thank you so much for that profound insight on psychology of money. So the next question is, what does one need to know to have a fearless financial life? We are all scared when we think about a lot of people actually, when you tell them about finances, they kind of get scared. Especially, I don't want to talk about financial future, but a lot of people, they are just scared about matters of financial life. So maybe you could share with us what you need to know so that we don't become fearful.
What a great question, especially in the current, time of COVID and economic disbalance and what the whole world is going through, right? Well, and as you asked me that question, what I started thinking about is, first of all, how common financial fear is, financial anxiety and stress, right? So kind of
Mhm,
understanding that, is I don't know if it's half the battle, but it's part of kind of the journey of getting away from feeling complete fear to getting into more of a balanced approach, right? And that's
mhm,
the next thing would be is the understanding that, first of all, fear is so common, and
mhm,
the second piece is that, setting the expectation of not having fear whatsoever is almost unrealistic. Does that make
mm.
sense?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I related to when couples come to financial counseling with me, or just working on relational issues, when
Mhm,
their expectation is not to fight at all or not to have any arguments, a psychologist would
mm,
say that's an unrealistic expectation. Of course, you're going to fight. Of course, you're going to have arguments. It's really how you come back from them and how you resolve those conflicts is what's important. And in the same way, we can extrapolate that same mindset and then use it here.
mm,
So,
mm,
setting the assumption of not having fear or anxiety whatsoever or stress whatsoever on money maybe not be the right paradigm or perspective to have. Maybe it's, yes, I'm going to walk through that fear and I'm going to come out on the other side, a better person, having learned what I need to learn in that moment and continue on my journey.
wow. Actually, I really like the part that you said. We cannot say we have zero fears about money. That would be like pretending, But what is important is learning how you can walk out of it. Like, yes, I have this fear about money, but I'm going to face it and, handle it head on, which is very, very important for people to have that in mind, because so long as we are in an economy that goes up and down, there will always be a reason to, have fear. Example, for people who had invested in the stock market, let's say last year, when Corona came this year, we saw like a lot of stock prices going down. So it would be so weird to say that if you had invested in the stocks market, you don't have any fear at all. But what is very important is for people to learn how to, can go through it, in as much as everything just happens in terms of their finances. So the next question is, what are the most common emotions surrounding money, and how can we overcome them?
Well, we just answered one of them. Of course,
Uh-huh.
fear is the first and foremost, the most common emotion that people have around money. Kind of, I'm thinking of some statistics, and the American Psychiatric Association
Mhm.
does a Stress in America survey, I think, every year. And
Mhm.
money or financial stress has been the
Mhm.
number one stressor at 63% of the American population, at least, for the last decade. I mean, every year for the last 10 years. I think last year was the only one um, that political unrest kind of started to match or equate to the same levels of anxiety and fear that money did for the previous 9 years. So yeah, predominantly it's fear, but there are so many other uh, emotions that get expressed through money. And actually, the saying that I have is money is actually a blank canvas that our unconscious mind uses to express through our thoughts, our emotions, and our behaviors, right? So what
Yeah.
happens is if we feel resentful, we're going to express that resentment through money, like withholding
Mm-hmm.
money from family members. We express love through money. But the most common ones are fear, shame, guilt, resentment, and jealousy.
Let's speak about jealousy and jealousy, the jealousy part. Let's maybe you could break down each of them, maybe a statement for each.
Sure. So with fear, it's oftentimes um, what we don't know, we fear most. And somehow,
Mm,
when we look at people who struggle with finance, their internal programming says, hey, I'm bad with money. There's nothing I can do about it. So instead of addressing it or facing it, like we were just talking about, I'm going
mm,
to run with the fear and avoid it. So that's kind of what happens with fear. You know, shame is something that shame is a common one because the cultural piece kind of comes into the discussion of shame.
mm-hmm,
Money shame is something that's so common as our culture uses money as a stick for success, a measure for success. So if you feel like you're not measuring up to other people, if you're not on the right side of that spectrum and you don't feel successful or competent or any of those sort of feelings, you know clients go into the other side of the spectrum, which is shame. And
mm,
shame is actually fear of not being your true self, that you're not good enough to be you,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
with guilt, it's guilt is another fear of not being good enough for others. It's caring about what other people think and not being able to provide for instance, for your family and feeling guilty around that. And then resentment and jealousy, a lot of it has to do with financial status and comparing yourself to how well or not well you're doing with your peers, with your community, and things like that.
Hmm. That is so profound, especially the jealousy part. I think that is where also this social media era comes in, where people try to, fake it on social media, yet they are wallowing in financial mess just because they need to show to their peers that indeed I'm living the life of my dream, or maybe my life is okay. So I think that is one of the things that leads to that is one of the things that leads to jealousy as an emotion attached or surrounding money.
Mm.
And also on matters of money shame, as you were just sharing, I was just thinking sometimes even money shame can come in when let's say you become homeless. That brings you shame, or maybe you become bankrupt. You become shameful, and a lot of people don't want to share this, especially when they know they are almost getting bankrupt. They will hide it from others. then they'll just come to share when everything is fully blown, and maybe the situation is beyond repair or recovery. So yeah, thank you so much for highlighting those. We'll go to the next question, which is how can one harness their money emotions?
Hmm. So, what a great question. I think that understanding that money is emotional and
Mm-hmm.
there's psychological roots to how we behave with money is the first part of the conversation, right?
Mm,
So many narratives out there in social media and our culture
mm,
really just talk about, well, you gotta take control of your money, or your money will take control over you. And again,
mm,
it goes back to the practical and mathematical narrative, but
mm-hmm,
really harnessing our financial power and really understanding how our financial psychology influences our decision making process is the study of financial psychology. So how do we do that? I came up with a term called an emotional budget,
mm-hmm,
which means that we need to understand what our underlying emotions are, and that not all emotions are bad, not all emotions are
mm-hmm.
negative, and that
Yeah.
emotions come on a spectrum,
Mm-hmm.
right? So,
Mm,
what we want to avoid, as all the economists are saying, are the emotions that are dominating or overwhelming us to the point that we're inactive, or we're so overtaken by that emotion that we cannot make a rational choice at that point.
mm-hmm.
So that's one side of that spectrum. And on the other side of that spectrum is emotions can be extremely motivating,
Mm-hmm. Mm,
right? How
yeah.
you remember a time where you felt passionate about money, so you wanted to talk to other people on YouTube, and
Yeah.
really that's what the emotion was that drove you to have this conversation with me and all your other guests before and the ones after. So that's the power of emotion, that it moves us to and motivates us to do the next thing. However, of course, it can be completely overwhelming, and really having an understanding of where you are on that spectrum. Are you in despair? Are you in deprivation? Or are you are you, let's say, motivated? Do you feel like enthusiastic, right? Or
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
encouraged? Maybe a little
Yeah.
nervous, but you're encouraged to do the next step. And that
Mm,
is what's called an emotional budget. To be able to understand this particular feeling or emotion and
mm,
its intensity is too much, so I have to work my way back to some sort of emotional balance. And this emotion on this side is exactly what's helping me to drive forward and be enthusiastic and empowered to accomplish my goals.
wow. I'm super amazed by that. I never thought about it when when you said, like, our emotions really drive us on how we will act towards money, or even how we'll talk about it. If you are so enthusiastic about money, you'll find yourself really wanting to share it with everyone, wanting to just say good things about it. But when you have let's say fear or maybe doubt and all that, you'll find yourself coiling back. And as you said, it's important for us to just be able to take care of our emotions, such that when a negative emotion tries to come, you not move away from it, but you try to change it with something positive, so that you can be able to have a better attitude towards money. That was so deep. So we'll go to the next question. As a psychologist, what would you say drives our beliefs about money?
Well, I think a huge part of it is our culture And
Mm-hmm.
what I mean by culture, of course, everybody starts thinking about, your nationality or what country you grew up in. But culture can mean the culture within your family, the culture that you have with your friends, or even
Mm.
the neighborhood that you live in. And the important piece to understand is that I think you mentioned this earlier in our talk today, is that culture is aligned with our values and assumptions about what success looks like, what our norms and customs, and it's different from culture to culture. For instance, if I was a Buddhist monk living in Tibet, money would
Mm.
that would be a culture that I would be surrounded by the environment, and I would not
Yeah.
be inundated with financial choices and decisions. However, living
Mm.
in Los Angeles, California, in a
Mm.
metropolis, obviously, my decision-making processes around money are greatly
Yeah.
affected by, what the Los Angeles culture is, and that is
Mm.
of, status, keeping up with the Kardashians, and all of that. So those are the
Mm.
two common parallels. The other piece is that um, we also have to look at our money story. And our money story
Mm-hmm.
also comes from not only the culture that we grew up in, but it's the
Mm.
story that's been passed on to us from various places, but predominantly our family, our parents,
Mm-hmm.
our grandparents. And what
Mm.
we call that in financial psychology is intergenerational narratives.
Mm.
So intergenerational narratives inform how
Mm-hmm.
we act with money. So I think I mentioned to you earlier that I actually grew up
Yes.
in Moscow, Russia, and Soviet Union. So
Mm.
the narratives that I grew up with, that money was not even important because communism, everybody was supposed to be equal. Those are the
Yeah.
narratives that were, sort of placed in my head at an early age, and then having immigrated to the United States at some point, the narrative really changed, and the cultural piece then becomes very, very important. So what happened was that those intergenerational narratives came clashing against the new culture that I was living in. And
Mm-hmm. Mm.
so understanding that is really kind of the combination of intergenerational narratives and culture.
Wow. And I must say it might have been very difficult for you to transit from the culture in Moscow to the one in USA, because in Moscow they were more of communists, and in USA it's totally different. It's you and your money. That's it. It's not about the community. It's not communal, and so, and I believe a lot of people tend to face such a challenge, especially we are in a world where we have diverse cultures around us. People are nowadays, embracing traveling and living in other continents for some time. Then they go back to other continents or their original continents. And it has really affected, especially the kids that come from such kind of families, because they kind of become mixed up or confused since they've been the cultures they've been exposed to, they are totally different. And there's also one thing you mentioned earlier, is that basically culture starts from the family units, how your family handles money, and the narratives they have about money. I think this is where, as families, it's important uh, we start setting up positive financial cultures in our families, so that our family members, in as much as they get to travel to other places, they'll be having this kind of roots on how they think about money. So to our audience, feel free to ask any question. If you have any question, feel free to share in the comment section. If you have any feedback, this is the time you can write it in the comment section, and we shall be tackling each of them towards the end of the session, as well as ensure you give us a thumbs up and share this link with your friends and also on your other platforms so that we can all get to learn together. Remember, the topic for tonight is emotions and money, how our emotions influence our money personality. So it's important for us to learn how our thought pattern, how our attitude towards money gives us a certain financial personality. And maybe Dr. Alex, maybe you could share with us, do we have specific financial personalities? Like, we usually say we have sanguines and, chlorics and all that. Do we have the same thing when it comes to financial personalities?
Mm. That's a great question, and actually, there's no specific personality that has been researched by the academic community. What we do know, there are patterns or common patterns that people behave with money, and those are
Mm-hmm.
called financial disorders or maladaptive behaviors. So the
Mm-hmm.
five most common ones that actually I'm covering in a self-study course called Love and Money that will
Mm-hmm.
be coming out shortly. Is the first one is overspending or shopaholism, right? It's something that
Yeah, shopaholics,
guest
yeah.
star guest star of that list. Of course, everybody can relate to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Another one is enabling, and that's a common one in how we relate to money, especially in our families. We see in Western culture and American culture is um, young adult kids are having a hard time launching out of the nest and leaving their home, so their parents
Mm-hmm.
continuously take care of them in various ways. And that becomes what's called financial enabling.
Mm-hmm.
Some other ones are financial hoarding, which is literally the opposite side of the spectrum of shopaholism. It's a person who is so attached to every penny that
Mm-hmm.
no amount of money is enough for them to have in the bank. And they're not willing to spend any money on even the basic needs.
Are they
So,
the stingy ones? We
yeah,
call them the stingy ones.
well, it's kind of like a miser mindset,
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is initially, it's almost like their behavior seems very practical and very healthy because they're actually saving a lot of money, right? So on the surface, it seems like, oh, this is great. This person is saving money and they're very prudent and paying attention to every detail. But then again, they're not spending any money. And then the question becomes, well, what is the money for? If you're holding on to every single penny, and I just literally had a couple that I was working with, and one of the partners was a hoarder, and the other one was a shopaholic. It's a match made in financial technology heaven.
Yeah.
You know, they were just newly retired, and both worked very hard to save a lot of money. And the hoarding partner was just not willing to spend any money on anything, not on trips, not on anything luxurious, nothing. And it really kind of created a lot of conflict between in their coupleship, in their marriage.
Yeah, I can only imagine, you have a shopaholic and you have the miser, and the shopaholic thinks like, okay, we need to celebrate. Like, that is why we are working. That
Yes.
is why we are spending, 8 hours working on a job or on our business. And then the miser is like, oh my God, this money is going to end. We need to accumulate more fast, which I think, which one would you recommend for someone to, work towards becoming? Is there an in between shopaholic and Misa? Can we become in between, or which personality do you think is healthy for someone?
Well, it's not like you can work towards a healthy personality. Your personality
Mm,
is innate to you. So some people are very practical by nature, right?
mm,
So they tend to actually go into vocations and jobs that are very practical. For instance, accountants. for instance, finance people, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and on and on. Maybe computer programmers, scientists, things like that.
Yeah.
People who are creative and open go
Mm-hmm.
into more creative type of work, type of jobs and employment. So they become artists and dancers and actors and creative writers and things like that. So their strong suit may not be that of practical approach to money. And so I think the whole conversation really is about understanding where you lie on that personality scale, and then getting closer and closer and closer to the middle, to the balance point, to equilibrium.
Perfect. Actually, that one actually answered my next question, because I was about to ask you, how did you solve the issue with that couple that came? They were two different personalities, but you said it's important for people to come towards a common ground, closer to each other, so that the shopaholic doesn't feel like my opinion is not being respected, and the miser doesn't feel like the other person is being selfish.
Mm.
So
So the great point about that is, as you
mhm.
mentioned, then money becomes a point of a power struggle.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
It becomes something that the shopaholic partner felt controlled by the miser partner. And a
Mm.
lot of the conversations centered and treatment centered around how do we improve your communication so that one person doesn't feel controlled, but the other person
Mm.
doesn't feel like they are not being heard, and the miser didn't feel like they're heard because they felt
Yeah.
like if it's not in the budget, we can't talk about it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, because I've also experienced such kind of clients. They come to you, and when they are sharing, and you realize one partner is like, mm-mm, it is not in the budget, so you're not going to talk about it. You're not going to, sometimes it's good to just talk about things, so that you allow your mind to go there. Personally, encourage people to, if you want to, let's say, buy a certain asset, even before you get that money, start talking about it, so that your mind travels to that destination, so that you can get motivated to work towards it. I can see there's Lionel Shipman. He says, hello Sheila and Dr. Alex, love the segment. Will you please address why there is such a struggle between needs versus wants? Thank
Mhm.
you so much, Lionel, for joining us. We really appreciate. He is a shout out from us. I believe, Dr. Alex, maybe you could answer that question before we proceed.
Sure. Great question, Lionel. Our wants are based in our ego, and our needs are
Mm-hmm.
based in the practical, mathematical, economical part of our relationship with money. So
Mm-hmm.
our ego will always want to drive towards wanting more and more and more and more. And that's why when we talk about financial planning and
Yeah.
setting up a budget or a spending plan, it's really important to include line items that will help you not feel an emotion of deprivation, right? If we feel
Yeah.
deprived by being on a budget, like
Mm-hmm.
being on a diet, nobody really wants to be on a diet that's so restrictive that you can't eat anything you like. And it's the same way with a budget. We want to
Yeah.
reward ourselves maybe a little bit or some so
Mm-hmm.
that we feel motivated to
Yeah.
continue to implement the plan and continue to take care of our needs first and wants second. And that's the important piece, is that once our emotions are rebalanced and centered, we're much more able to be accountable and stick to a plan and continue with our budget, because we don't feel deprivation. We don't feel those dominating emotions, and we're actually motivated to save or invest and really see our financial goals come to fruition? Great question, Lionel.
I like how you've answered it. I really like the way you've put it out, because I once had people who were like, I'm a shopaholic. I can't manage to go with a shopping list every time. And how can I start? And one of the recommendations I say, it's important for you to give yourself an allowance, so that if you're creating a shopping list or a budget that is worth, let's say, $1,000, at least put $200 as an allowance for yourself in case you just go out of it, so that you don't end up beating yourself and becoming so that is not even being frugal, because when you become frugal, you give yourself allowance. That is what we call being stingy. You become so stingy with yourself that instead of it being a positive thing, it ends up becoming a miserable thing. And that is one of the reasons why most people, I believe, it makes them think like budgeting is a bad thing, anything to do with money is a bad thing, because when they started their journey, they didn't give themselves that allowance. And
Yeah,
so long as
budget becomes a bad word, right? And
Mhm, exactly.
I love the allowance piece. I actually
Mhm.
renamed it for my clients, and what we
Mhm.
talk about is we call it mandatory splurging.
Oh, nice. All
Yeah.
right.
So that it changes the narrative in their mind, and all of a sudden
Mhm.
they're excited about doing some spending, and they're not again depriving themselves of anything, especially for the shopaholics, right? Who are used to
Yeah.
constantly buying things. Um, So with mandatory splurging, they get to allocate a certain amount of money, and they have to spend it. And it's actually interesting what happens. Let's say it's $200. I've seen some
Uh-huh.
clients who are not able to spend the whole $200 because
Hmm.
what happens is they kind of go to the other side of the spectrum, and they want to be accountable, and they're counting every penny, and then all of a sudden they're sort of too attached to their money and being prudent and things like that. So for them, sometimes it becomes difficult to even spend the allocated amount of money, the $200, let's say. Yeah. So then we talk about maybe kind of rolling it over into the next month, or sometimes if it's really a big deal, then I kind of talk about making them spend the entire 200. So
As you were saying about that, I just thought, do you think when we rename certain financial terms into things we like, does it affect our attitudes towards money? Because this one, I've seen it working for me. When I stopped calling my budget, I became attracted to budgeting. So I don't know, is there a mental part that plays in it? Because I've also seen it with my clients. Every time when we rename something, maybe your bank statements, you don't call them bank statements anymore. You give them a very pet name, something nice. Then I realized they start becoming positive on their approach towards even viewing their statements. So, do you think if we change the name or the financial terms to something we like, does it really, is it a mental thing, or it's just that we are so excited about it?
absolutely, it's actually a narrative that's been going around in the financial services industry, and there's a
Mm-hmm.
active push to refrain from using terms like budget because it
Mm-hmm.
does um, trigger some clients and its association with really being a bad word. So oftentimes we
Mm-hmm.
actually use spending plan instead of budget. And then I'm thinking of clients that I'm working with now, and I actually helped one of them rename some of their bank accounts instead of
Mm-hmm.
checking and savings and
Mm-hmm.
prudent reserve.
Yeah.
It was, you know, John Smith sleep well at night account, right?
Yeah.
Because when we call it an emergency account, it kind of it insinuates that an emergency is going to happen. And we
Yeah.
don't need to invite that into our lives. So, you know, a sleep well account is, you know, if something does happen, this money is there for that, and I don't have to worry about it. And a regular checking account, he renamed, I think, or she renamed as a live well account, right? So sleep well, live well, and I think that's been working really, really well for them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And another thing that I'm sorry we are diverting a little bit from the normal questions, but as you are sharing about the financial personalities, do you think how someone has been raised, does it contribute to the personality you have towards money? The reason I'm saying this, if you, let's say, most people that I've come across, if they grew up from an environment where there was a lot of lack of finances, or finances were a bit limited, most people tend to say such people, they grow up and end up being not frugal, but they end up being misers. And others say that if you grew up where the financial resources were in abundance, they become shopaholics. But like on the other side, if you think of it again, other people will say people who are shopaholic as adults, they lacked it when they were young. So, do you think how a person has been brought up, does it come to affect or reflect in their financial personalities as an adult?
Absolutely. And we kind of covered it in the conversation about culture. So when we talked about family culture, that's exactly what
Yeah.
you're talking about, right? So our environment, our upbringing, our intergenerational narratives is exactly
Mm.
what you're talking about in this case. And then the other piece that comes into this conversation is nature versus nurture. So when you use the word personality, personality is innately to each, it's innate to each
Mm.
person. And it's not necessarily that's very, very amenable to change, but our environments do definitely help to shape our
Ex-
experience, our beliefs, our
mm.
assumptions, and our norms. So definitely how we grew up definitely affects how we behave and the decisions that we make in the here and now. What's interesting is if you take a family and take three siblings, I actually had a
Mhm.
client who had three daughters, and the first
Mhm.
one was very practical, on point with all of her financial decisions.
Mm.
The middle one was an artist and kind of didn't really care for money either way. And the last, the youngest daughter just
Mhm.
really had an avoidant relationship with money, a lot of fear. And they really grew up in the same
Yeah.
in the same family. So in that way, yes, our innate personalities do
Mhm.
have a lot to do with how we behave and interact with money. In the same way, why is it that the one daughter, ended up going into a certain profession and became a dancer versus the oldest daughter became an accountant? You know,
Mm.
personality does have a lot to do with it, and but you know, again, environment does as well.
All right, all right. That one you really answered it very well. So we'll go to the other question is what should we be striving for to develop a healthier relationship with money? What should a person focus on to to develop a healthier relationship with money? Should we focus on just spending or accumulating more money, or how should we do that?
Well, of course, everybody wants more money, right? That seems to be the answer. But unfortunately, I was saying that you can't out earn your ego, right? Just having more money is not going to mean that you'll be necessarily happier. Of course, you know, there's other cliches about having more money and increasing your well-being, of course. And there's research around that as well. Part of the research actually points out that after you reach a certain amount of earning of income, let's say I think it's about
Mhm,
$150,000, your level of well-being and happiness does not
mhm,
exponentially grow after that. So, just having a lot more money does not mean that you're much happier, 10 times happier, 100 times happier. So just to kind of want to throw that out there. But what should we strive for is clarity and awareness. Clarity
mhm,
and
mhm.
awareness are the two factors that will help each person be able to have the agility and the ability to pivot in any direction, because this is not a stagnant picture. Our lives are constantly moving. Who knew we were going to be in this COVID situation? And our
Mhm.
mental health, our financial health, our physical health was going to be affected. Nobody knew
Yeah.
that in 2019, and here we are. What we've had to do
Mm,
is, of course, adjust on the fly, pivot, and be able to, roll with the punches. What's happened is that, so, at the beginning of the pandemic, people have gone into the stress response system, the fear, the fight, flight, and freeze. Some of the
yeah.
fighters are on LinkedIn or chasing after jobs and income, and their motto is this is not going to take us down. And then the
Yeah.
people who are fleers and freezers, they're
Mm,
they're they're so emotionally overwhelmed by what's
mhm,
happening. They just need to take their time to be able to emotionally process what's happening. And what
mm,
happens is that each person needs to go through their journey to come back
mm,
into a place of balance, a place of clarity, and a place
mm.
of equilibrium.
Wow. Do you think money brings happiness, as people say?
Of course, of course, absolutely. And I don't want to paint this, dire picture like money. It doesn't. Of course, it brings so much experience, travel,
Mhm.
sharing love with your kids and family. I mean, money can afford us so many different things. But
Yeah.
being aware of what it can bring for us is what's important. What's the meaning that we attach to it is what's important to understand.
Exactly. Thank you so much for giving that clarification. Because the reason I asked you that is because a lot of people they just say money can buy happiness, but they really don't have the clarity on how it should be. For sure, money can afford you good things that bring you happiness, but you need to have clarity on how you handle it at that time. So we'll go to the next question, which is actually it's a statement. It's a statement. Money is not about finances; it's about emotions. Do you agree with this? And why would you be agreeing with this?
Well, I absolutely agree with it. My slogan for the Financial Psychology Center is that's where money and emotion meet. And as we talked throughout our conversation today,
Mm-hmm.
money is how our emotions get expressed. So if you're
Yeah.
an unhappy person deep down, money is not going to make you happier. It's just going to make you more of who you are.
That is so true. Actually, that brings out the point where we usually say people don't really change. There are people who, when they don't have financial resources, they have a totally different personality. But once they get financial resources or they get money, they totally change, or they totally showcase a different personality. What that simply means is that this person, they were like that. It's only that there was no trigger to allow them bring out their real self. And unfortunately, it's only money that brings out the real self of a lot of people, right?
Mm, absolutely. Yep. I would say that tapping into our emotions and understanding, um,
Mm-hmm.
what drives our behavior, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's assumptions, beliefs, what is our goal? Is our goal to just accumulate money without any sort of meaning or reason? Because that could be a sort of an addiction of itself. And what is the goal of having money? What is money going to do for you, and what is your why, which is a cliche saying as well, but it definitely is applicable here.
Sure, sure. To our audience, we are about to come to the end of the show, and we encourage you to keep on sending in your questions. If you have any question regarding your mindset, attitude towards money, or if you have any feedback that you'd like to share with us, feel free to post in the comment section or chat section. And Dr. Alex, who is the founder of Financial Psychology Center and the certified marriage and family counselor, will be answering our questions or any thought you'd like him to discuss on. So our next question is how can one but I think we already handled that. How can one handle negative emotions around money? Especially as I said, when I started this thing we usually see, especially when you go to the shopping mall, if someone is buying something and they give the cashier their card, if the card is swiped and for some reason it's declined, sometimes it's because of the system error. But before we come to that resolution, the cashier tells you, ma'am or sir, your card is being declined, maybe you don't have money. The immediate reaction of almost 95% of people is like, no, I have a lot of money in that account. Some even go to the extent of quoting the exact figure they think is in that account. And they can even become so agitated and angry. So to avoid such kind of scenarios, because sometimes it's not that that person is like that, but it just happens. So how can we get to overcome such kind of emotions and work on making them become our lifestyle, to have positive emotions as our lifestyle?
Well, I think we covered that earlier when we said, having emotional awareness and really
Mm,
understanding that emotions have a spectrum and that they come and go, they pass. One of the issues is, though, they're not as amenable for control. We can change our thoughts
mm,
much quicker than our emotions. All we can do with our emotions is kind of let them pass. And that's the uncomfortable part of dealing with our emotions, right?
mm,
But what's interesting is as soon as we turn that switch and instead of fighting against an emotion, we actually embrace it. We notice what we're feeling
mm,
when we run that credit
mm,
card or debit
mm,
card and there's no money inside. Do I
mm,
go right into this is the worst thing ever and I'm in complete fear and shock? That's the underlying
mm,
emotion. Or can I really acknowledge that this is uncomfortable, but it's not the worst feeling in the world and it will pass?
yes.
And even just that reframing helps to deal and de escalate that emotion from, on a
Mm.
scale from 1 to 10, if, you know, 10 was the highest emotion. Now maybe it's at a 6 or a 7, maybe even a 5.
Yeah. Actually, that is so true. And I believe when we become emotionally aware, and of course, I tend to think even emotional intelligence applies when it comes to how we react or act around money. So we are coming to the end of the show. Thank you so much, Dr. Alex, for the wonderful information you've shared with us. I've personally learned a lot, and I believe the audience has also learned a lot. And if anyone has a question, this is the time you can feel free to share in the chat section so that Dr. Alex can get to answer and give us his thoughts. So, Dr. Alex, maybe you could share with us your social media accounts or contacts so that if anyone wants to reach out to you, they can contact you.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure to be on the show.
Mm,
Financialpsychologycenter.com is our website, and we're
mhm.
on four social media platforms: Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram as Fin Psych Center or Financial Psychology Center on those platforms. So look forward to hearing from anybody who wants to talk about money. And it's been an absolute pleasure to be on the show. Thank you so much.
Thank you too for your time. We really appreciate you. And to our audience, thank you so much for staying with us during the show. I believe you have learned on how your emotions affect your money and your financial personality. And Dr. Alex, we really want to thank you. And personally, I would recommend you write a book on that because you
Thank you so much.
have a lot of knowledge, and not just theoretical but practical knowledge that is really relating with what we think and how it affects our money. So allow me to really appreciate you and thank you so much for your time today. We really, really are grateful, and I must say we need to do another episode so that we can dive deeper, especially, maybe you can touch base on how uh, parents can, create an environment that supports positive financial habits that can also influence their children and also their choice. And before you go, I've seen parents who choose for their children what to do in school, especially in university and college. And maybe the personality of this child doesn't go with what the parents want them to do in school. So maybe the child is very outgoing and, very not talkative, but outgoing, a person who, when you check their personality, they would do well in arts. But you find the parent is pushing this child to do things like medicine. So does such kind of things also affect the person's ability or how they handle money as they grow older?
Yeah, that's a narrative that's been so common where parents exude control, right,
Mm-hmm.
over their kids, especially in Asian cultures, Indian culture, um,
Yeah.
uh, some Western European cultures,
Mm.
and predominantly the parents want the kids to be, a doctor or a lawyer, and which means
Mm.
it's automatic, not only an ability to earn a great living and income, but it's also a status thing, right?
Yeah.
And that's
Mm.
why the parents really want their kids to succeed, so they want their kids to be a doctor or a lawyer. However, obviously, every person has their personality that drives them to be what they want to be, and
Mm.
it's a conversation exactly like we talked about. It's a conversation about what do I want to do? Why do I want to do it? Is money
Mm.
important? If it's not important, how am I going to support myself? And
Mm.
these are difficult conversations to have between kids and parents, but they need to happen.
Wow. Thank you so much. Thank you for that. I really wanted to get your view about it because it's something that a lot of people fight a lot. It brings a lot of conflicts. And at a later stage, it really affects a person's personality towards money and life in general. So, once again, thank you so much, Dr. Alex. We really appreciate and honor you. And we look forward to doing more episodes with you in the near future. To our audience, thank you so much for being with us. Ensure you press the subscribe button and share this video with as many people as possible so that they can get to take control of their emotions, which automatically will lead them to taking control of their money. So until then, keep safe, keep sanitizing and maintaining social distancing, wear a mask, and let's meet next Wednesday for the next episode. Thank you so much and God bless you.